Hey everybody, how's it going? Coach Jen here, and I am going to do a little overview on macronutrients and how to calculate your macros as they are known. So I'm going to get right to the point. So macronutrients are the big nutrients found in foods. They are protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Alcohol is also a macronutrient, and they all have different functions in our body. And basically, protein, which is the building block of your muscles, it helps make sure that all your connective tissues, your ligaments, your tendons, your bones, your skin, your hair, and all that are growing properly. So they're needed for growth, they're needed for repair, and they're needed for recovery. And proteins are also going to help you feel fuller longer. Then we have carbohydrates, which are a quicker source of energy. They increase your blood sugar, your blood glucose, and generally are short-lived in the body. There's some argument whether or not they are actually essential or not, because the body is actually capable of making glucose from other macronutrients, and it's also capable of pulling glucose out of your muscles to a degree. But I would say that carbohydrates should be part of a balanced diet, as long as we'll talk a little bit about the quality of carbohydrates as well in this presentation. So we'll get into that a bit. So as long as they are of good quality, then generally they are definitely warranted in any diet. There are cases where we might want to do a bit of a lower carbohydrate diet. So I'm not promoting any specific diet here like keto or anything like that today. So this is really just about the macronutrients themselves. And then we have fat, not to be vilified. We need fat in our diets. Fats are important because they are a dense energy source. They help with vitamin absorption. If we didn't eat fats, it would be really hard to absorb the vitamins from our foods. They definitely will help induce satiety or the feeling of fullness. They help with our neurological system, with nerve impulses, the transport of nutrients within our body, and they are super important for hormones and immune function. So that's kind of a quick overview of the macronutrients and what they do in our body. Let me just figure out how I change slides. There we go. So in our body, carbohydrates, as I mentioned, convert to glucose, which is energy. Proteins actually are made up of what are called amino acids. And you've probably heard of BCAAs, or branched chain amino acids. Those are 4 amino acids that really help with muscle and performance. But there are actually 20, and then some people say 21 amino acids that are essential to our life. Amino acids actually can also convert to glucose in the body, but generally speaking, they are needed for building. Like, amino acids are the building blocks of our body. So if I ever talk to you about amino acids, what I'm really talking about is protein, because those are the building blocks of proteins. And then we have fats, and fats in our bodies, when we digest them, convert to the simplest form, which is ketones. There is a process by which fat can convert to glucose, but I'm not going to get into that. So ketones and glucose actually are the simplest form of energy that your body can use. And your body uses glucose and ketones in a very complicated thing that we all studied in high school biology, or maybe university biology, depending on where you're from. And that's called the Krebs cycle, or the TCA cycle. I'm not going to get into that here, other than to say that both of those components, which are the simplest form of energy, enter the Krebs cycle and produce something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and that is energy. And that is what keeps you moving, walking, breathing, everything. If you didn't have any energy, you would drop dead right now. And if you weren't producing that ATP, you'd be in trouble. And this all happens in your cells, in the energy powerhouse of your cells called the mitochondria. You do not need to remember this, but I just want to make sure you are aware. And you have billions of mitochondria in your body. I could do a whole little episode on mitochondria and how important they are and taking care of them. But basically, if you eat a good balanced diet, you will be helping your little mitochondria do their job, which is give you energy to live your life. All right, so protein comes from meats, fish, eggs. Eggs are actually about half fat. Carbohydrates come from vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, legumes. Notice here I didn't put bread and pasta. And the reason I don't put grains under carbohydrates, which I mean, grains are a carbohydrate, is they're really not your best friend when it comes to energy sources in terms of overall health. I'm not saying don't eat them, but typically most people, when I say carbs, think of like bread and pasta. But actually, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and legumes are going to be your healthier choices for your carbohydrates in your diet. I'm not saying never eat the grains, but if optimal health and feeling great and looking great and performing well are your goals, then you might want to keep your carbohydrates to these more natural, unprocessed forms. Now, in brackets here, I have fruits in season. Very difficult in Canada, but generally speaking, we want to stay away from tropical fruits in the winter and eat more tropical fruits in the summer, and then eat more sort of local fruits, that things like apples and pears and those kinds of things in the winter if we're eating fruit, and berries and stuff like that here in Canada. And then nuts and seeds, I have in bracket soaked. It's actually really important not to overconsume nuts and seeds in their raw form or roasted form. It's better for them to be soaked because they do contain some components to them that can be a little problematic if you eat too much of them. And people have different degrees of sensitivities to nuts and seeds. If you're somebody who's always achy and inflamed, you might want to look at the amount of nuts that you're eating in your diet. I know, as an example, when I cut out peanuts and almonds in my diet, all of a sudden my joints felt way less achy. I'm super sensitive. You may not be as sensitive as I am, but it's something to take a look at. And then we've got legumes, so things like beans, hummus is a good one that a lot of people eat. So what I would say, if you're eating a lot of legumes, just remember that they are not really a great source of protein. They are advertised as such, but it's kind of false advertising. They're actually more of a source of carbohydrates. And I'm going to show you a little table in a minute that explains what foods contain how much protein. And I'll show you that you need to eat basically like a room full of legumes to get your protein requirements. And the protein that comes from legumes is actually not the most bioavailable. So your body has a really hard time using the protein from that source. So if you're going to eat a lot of legumes, I really highly recommend that you pressure cook them. If you have an Instapot, you can do that. You can also soak and sprout your legumes. That would be a better way to eat them. They also, like nuts and seeds, can contain a lot of components that can be problematic for people, especially if you have any sort of autoimmune conditions or just suffer digestively. If you have like bloating or gas, you might notice that increasing legumes makes that worse and decreasing them makes that better. So just pay attention to how you feel when you eat legumes, because generally people feel very gassy and bloated after them. And food that you're eating should not make you feel like that. It means that you've got an issue with it, and you might want to just eliminate or avoid it as much as you can to see if that changes things. So the other macronutrient, as we talked about, is fats, which are essential. And these are available mainly from oils that we use in our diet. The best source, I've kind of got them like listed in order of preference in terms of healthiness here. So animal sources of fat are actually going to be the healthiest, contrary to what we have been led to believe. You really want to try to avoid what we call the polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are generally PUFAs, which are generally found in seed oils. These can be extremely inflammatory, especially when eaten in high amounts. And unfortunately, most of our processed and prepared foods are fried in these seed oils, like canola oil is a good example. So just be careful if you're eating a lot of deep fried things, what that oil is actually, what the food is actually being fried in. So you want to try to keep your fats that you cook in to animal fats like butter and ghee. Ghee is just simply clarified butter. Tallow, which is animal fat, or beef fat, which is a great way, a great cooking oil because it doesn't have, it has a very high smoke point. And then for other general uses like avocado and coconut oil are actually pretty good for cooking. And then you want to save your olive oil for things like putting on your food as a dressing, as opposed to cooking in olive oil, because cooking olive oil is actually going to create the oil to become unstable. And unstable oils actually create what are called free radicals. And free radicals actually create cellular damage in our body, which can create problems down the road for our poor little mitochondria and create problems like cancer. So we don't want to go there. So butter, ghee, tallow would be my first choices for cooking in. And then coconut and avocado oil would be the second. And then olive oil for your dressings. And then other good sources of fat would be avocados themselves. Nuts and seeds are actually a good source of fat. Again, make sure they're soaked. And then most meats, especially beef and lamb and pork, will contain fat. Chicken obviously is going to be much leaner. And then eggs are going to be about half fat, half protein. And just because I'm saying that meats like beef and lamb contain fat and pork doesn't mean that they're bad, because fat is not bad. Remember what I said, you need it. Okay, so don't avoid the fat on a high quality source of beef or lamb or pork. So over here on the other side, what I've got is how many calories each of the macronutrients contain per gram. Now, this is going to be important to remember and be aware of when you are trying to calculate how much of each of the macronutrients you need to eat in a day. So you might want to write these numbers down. Protein, 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrates, 4 calories per gram. Fat, 9 calories per gram. And I've put alcohol on here just for reference because alcohol, as we know, is a toxin. It's an empty calorie because it's not really providing us any benefit or any nutrition, although it might feel like it in the moment. It actually is almost as high in calories per gram as fat. So it's really not going to serve you well. It's just giving you like empty, what we call empty calories. So write those numbers down. Keep that in mind because this is how you are going to figure out how much you should be eating in a day. All right, next slide. So when you start to try to figure out how much you should be eating in a day, you want to base your macros or your macronutrients on how much protein you need. You always want to start and prioritize protein. And as I mentioned, proteins come from meat, fish, eggs, a little bit from legumes, but I'm going to show you a chart in a moment. Now, if you've had your body composition done with me on the InBody machine, you will see a number on your body composition that's called skeletal muscle mass. This is kind of in the center of the page, and you want to look at this number and you want to multiply that by 2 as your minimum amount of protein in grams per day. So for example, if your skeletal muscle mass said that you have 70 pounds of skeletal muscle mass, multiplied by 2 would give you 140 grams per day minimum of protein, okay? So if fat loss is your goal, I've got this in brackets here, then muscle gain is your goal, don't be afraid to go a little higher than the double of that number, okay? If you are an untrained person, if you have a very low amount of skeletal muscle mass and a high amount of body fat, you might want to aim for quite a bit more protein than double. And if you're somebody who's really doing a heavy amount of workouts, like 5, 6 days a week, and you're really pushing the envelope and you're maybe training to compete, you can also go quite a bit higher on protein. It's really hard to overconsume protein, and it's also it's a misinformation to say like eating protein is bad for your kidneys and all that kind of stuff. Like, you would have to eat a ton of protein for that to be even a problem. And I'll just kind of a sidebar there. The reason that people will say that is when you've had maybe you've had blood tests done, and they look at something called your creatinine clearance. And what will happen is if you eat a lot of protein, creatinine or creatine is actually one of the amino acids that's found in meats. And if you eat a lot of that, it's going to be higher in your blood. This is not a bad thing, but unfortunately, when we look and we get that creatinine clearance blood test done, it will show higher on somebody who is eating a lot of meat, and then your doctor's office will call you, tell you you're going to be in kidney failure. No, it's not true. It just means that you're being eating more meat, and there's actually way better tests to test kidney function. And if that is a concern for you, please talk to me, because I'm very well versed in all of that, and I can get you the proper blood work that you should be having done. So oftentimes, a lot of our doctors don't know this stuff just because they're trained a certain way, but there are other tests that are generally available. So that was my little sidebar on kidneys and creatinine and creatine. Okay, so like I said, the more you train, the more protein you need. The more protein you eat, the less likely you are to have cravings for junk foods. And the reason for this is that every person has what is called a protein threshold that must be met in the day, or you will not be meeting your minimal nutrition requirements. So even if you've eaten a ton of food in the day, but you didn't eat enough protein, you will still have cravings because you haven't met that minimum amount of protein in the day. And I told you earlier that protein is made up of amino acids. So when you don't hit that amino acid threshold in the day, your body's like looking for stuff, and your brain, or your I guess your emotional self, doesn't really know that it's looking for protein. It just wants food, right? It just wants to put something in your mouth to satisfy that hunger that you're feeling, but that is actually coming from an amino acid deficiency, i.e. protein deficiency. So really super important that you make protein your focus. All right. So the biggest question I get is like, how much protein does food X contain? And as a general rule, when it comes to lean animal protein, 4 ounces, a quarter pound, which is approximately 110 grams, a pound is 454 grams, so about 115-ish grams of most lean animal protein is going to contain about 30 grams of carbs. So there's ways to figure this out, and you can screenshot this. You can screenshot any of this, by the way. And there's going to be a chart at the end, which I've posted in our Facebook group. But for those of you who are not on Facebook, who might be seeing this video on YouTube, feel free to just screenshot whatever you need. There's lots of different ways to figure out how much protein is in a different food. So if you're eating a food that has a nutrition label, look at the back of the label, and you're going to see listed protein, fats, and carbohydrates. So what you're looking for there is the protein. Make sure that you're looking at the protein and see how many grams per serving is in that particular food. Pay attention to the serving size, because if it's like a big package of something, there may be more than one serving in it. So like, make sure you understand that if it's like a package of, I don't know, as an example, like a big piece of, let's just say turkey, processed turkey or something, it comes in a package and it says on the back of the label, like per 2 slices, right? Like, make sure you look at what it's actually telling you is the serving size, so that you realize, like, I don't have to eat the whole package to get what it's telling me on here. I just need to eat 2 slices, etc., or like 30 grams or half the package or whatever. So that's by law that needs to be on any packaged food. So you should be able to find that. For things like meat, beef, chicken, or whatever, like that's not processed, that doesn't have a nutrition label, these things do not need to have a label on them by law. You just need to use an app like MyFitnessPal, or just go on Google and just, search how much does 4 ounces of 80% ground beef, how much protein does 80% ground beef contain, 4 ounces? And just realize that all of these numbers that you're going to see, whether it's on an app or whether it's online, these are all estimates. So don't like freak out if you're like, if you can't find the exact number, or if you see something different in one place from another. Just remember that we're just trying to hit a general number here. And if you're ever in doubt, just have a little bit more protein, because like I said, it's very hard to overeat on protein. And it's really difficult to gain weight or fat by eating more protein. So the other big thing is really learning to visualize what 30 grams of protein looks like, because we don't, most of us anyway, I hope, don't carry around a digital scale with us. That being said, getting a digital weigh scale from Walmart or whatever, they're pretty cheap, or Amazon, is going to be super helpful for you initially to figure out, okay, what does what is like 100 grams of meat or 4 ounces of meat actually look like when I put it on the scale? Sometimes, like, you'll be surprised how much of something you can eat, and other times you're like, oh, that's it, I've been really overeating or really undereating. Okay, so getting a digital scale is super helpful, and you want to weigh, I should have put this in writing, but you want to weigh the cooked amount, not the raw amount. Okay, so you want to weigh it after it's cooked. That is going to tell you exactly how much the thing weighs, and that is, we want to base the amount of protein on cooked weight. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. So how to figure out your other macros. And this is where it starts to become a little bit complicated, so bear with me. But if you're hitting your protein grams, so the example I used was 140 grams, start off with the same amount of carbohydrates. So 140 grams of protein and 140 grams of carbohydrates. Like I said, there are going to be some situations where you might want to go less carbohydrates, and some situations where you might want to go more. So some people that are very insulin resistant, have a lot of fat to lose, are people who tend to have a lot of cravings. You guys might want to go higher on the protein and lower on the carbohydrates. For people that would be like performance athletes that are more lean, that are really looking for like go more consistently, you might want to go higher on carbohydrates. So context here is key, but as a general starting point, start with an even number and see how it goes for a few months. That's the other big thing here, is that when you change things and when you start doing these types of things, you need to stick with these things consistently for at least 8 to 12 weeks for to know if it's actually making a difference or not. You should feel a difference generally within the first few weeks, but noticeable changes in like actual body composition take time. Okay, so don't be in a rush. This is a learning process. It's a journey for you, and I'm just here to guide you, and I'm hoping that this is educating. So fat, how much fat should you be eating? A lot of people in the nutrition space, especially bodybuilding space, will tell you to keep your fat really, really, really low. That's a mistake long term, because it's going to mess with your hormones. It's going to mess with your nervous system. It's going to mess with your stress levels and a hormone called cortisol. So be very careful going too low on your fat. And this is also assuming you are not drinking any alcohol, because as I mentioned, alcohol still has calories, 7 calories per gram. So this is assuming that you are not drinking any booze whatsoever. If you're drinking alcohol, you need to factor that into the overall amount of calories you're eating in a day. Okay, so talking about calories, on your body composition scan, and this is how we're going to figure out how much fat you should eat. So on your body composition scan, you have a number at the bottom left corner. It's called BMR. That stands for basal metabolic rate. This is how many calories you would need to consume in a day to maintain your current state if you were like living in an extremely sedentary, very low key kind of life, very little activity, almost no activity. That would be the minimum number of calories you would need to eat in a day. Now, most of us are moving around doing stuff. Most of us are probably working out maybe a couple times, 3 times a week. We're moving here and there throughout the day. So we want to take that BMR and we want to multiply it by an activity factor of about 1.2. Okay. So as an example, I've given you down here the if your BMR was around 1500 on your body composition, multiplied by 1.2 is going to give you 1800 calories a day. So that's your sort of your guide as to how much you should be eating in a day. Now, how do you calculate your fat from that? Well, you know that your protein and carbs are 4 calories per gram. We're going to be eating 140 grams of protein and 140 grams of carbs. So basically 280 times, sorry, what am I doing here? Is that right? 140 times, yeah, 140 times 4 calories per gram is going to give us 560 calories times 2 because we have protein and carbs. That is actually going to give us 1,120 calories from protein and carbohydrates. So how do I know how much fat to eat? I take the amount of calories per day that I need, 1,800. I subtract my 1,100 from protein and carbs, and that's going to give me 680 calories from fat. So then I take my 680 calories divided by my 9 calories per gram of fat, which gives me 75 grams of fat. Okay, so you can screenshot this, plug your own numbers in, and you can figure out exactly what you should be eating. If you need help with this or you want me to help you figure it out, I can help you do this. I can do it in my head most of the time for people because I've done it so often. But for those of you that are newer to this, this is like screenshot this, figure it out. Now, again, just go back up here. If you're super active, if you're somebody who's like, really pushing hard in the workouts, you're doing a lot of activity, you're moving around through the day, maybe you're running after kids, you're not sitting around a lot, you can increase your activity factor to 1.5 or even higher. Okay, so like really high level performance CrossFit athletes that are training like 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a day, I don't recommend it unless you're going to the games. Those people are like eating a ton of food. If they don't, they're going to crash and burn and they won't recover properly and they'll lose muscle. And that's not what somebody at that level wants. So for most people at our gym, I would say like 1.5 times the amount of your BMR would be a good starting point, and then see how you feel. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. If you feel great and that's giving you tons of energy and you're not putting on too much body fat or any body fat and you're feeling like you're gaining strength, great, keep it at that. If you feel like, oh, I'm a little sluggish, maybe losing a little bit of muscle, I don't have the strength I need, then maybe you want to increase it. So like I said earlier, this is a journey. This is like trying to figure out what works for you. By the same token, if fat loss is the goal and you're not seeing any fat loss after a few months, like when we redo your body composition, you're not noticing that your clothes are fitting differently. That's actually, by the way, the easiest way to tell if you're losing body fat is that your clothes should actually start to fit looser, assuming that you're losing body fat at the same rate that, or at a faster rate than you're gaining muscle. It's sort of different from person to person. Some people will gain fat and muscle at the same time, and then lose the body fat as the muscle increases, because muscle increases your metabolism. So it's very variable, but generally speaking, like, you should notice around your waist start to shrink a little bit. Your legs will probably get bigger as your muscles grow, as you're doing all those squats that we do. Your shoulders might get wider, but your arms should get leaner. Okay, so just kind of pay attention to that. Taking pictures is a huge, huge indicator of what's going on as well, because things in your body will shift around at first. You might weigh the same on the scale, but your body composition is changing. So again, if you have questions or you need help with this, just message me. I can help you figure this out. All right. Last but not least, I just want to put this chart up. I have put this chart in our Facebook group. For those of you not on Facebook, this is super helpful. What it's showing, and this is actually from something called Sustainivore. This is a really great place that I follow, and they're talking about eating in a sustainable way and getting enough animal protein, but eating healthy animal protein that is actually raised from ethical, sustainable sources. So if that's an issue for you, talk to me. I can point you to, her name is Diana Rogers, and she's written a book called Sacred Cow. And there's also a documentary about it as well that you can watch for free on YouTube, Sacred Cow. So what this chart is showing is that in terms of like your portions here, so you've got all your meats here at the top, going down to like your beans, tofu, peanut butter, and quinoa. And what it's showing you is how much of each of these things you need to get 30 grams of protein, okay? And then over here, she's got some visuals too, which are super, super helpful. Oops, sorry, what's that? Okay, which are super helpful kind of from a visual standpoint. But again, like, if you're not weighing, you're never gonna know, right? So like 4.5 ounces of shrimp is going to give you 30 grams of protein and 126 calories from shrimp. If I go down to some of the fattier things, like meat, beef, for example, that has a bit more fat, the calories are going up because it has fat, right? And then, just as an example here, some of the plant-based proteins, you have to eat a lot more of them to get 30 grams of protein. So now the calories are going way up. Like quinoa, I would need to eat 3 3/4 cups of quinoa to get 30 grams of protein. And that's 830 calories. Like, that's almost half of that example's amount of calories in a day. So it's like probably not the most beneficial source of protein if fat loss especially is your goal, because you've still got to be concerned about how much you're eating in terms of overall calories. So I love this chart in terms of just really showing protein quality and versus calories and nutrient density, because we're really getting like the same amount of protein in these more lean proteins up here at the top, going all the way down to beef. And not that beef is bad in any way. You're getting tons of nutrients in beef. Believe me, it's like one of the best sources of protein, and the fat in it is great for you. But it's just kind of showing you, like, with 4 ounces, you're only getting 243 calories, which is really not that much. So hopefully that makes sense. I think, oh yes, my last slide is just remember, like, let food be thy medicine, okay? So food should give you a healthy psychological response, should make you feel good emotionally, should make you perform better, should make you think clearly. It shouldn't put you in a coma. It should give you energy. It should give you a healthy hormonal response. It shouldn't increase your stress hormones. It shouldn't increase inflammation. It shouldn't make your gut irritated, right? Like, you should be honest with yourself when you're eating something about how it's making you feel, and pay attention to that. And then it should be something, like I said, that supports your immune system and minimizes the inflammation. So all of those things are important. Think quality first. And if you eat higher quality food, you generally need to eat less of it, and it'll be more nutrient dense for your body and more bioavailable. So my short little presentation about macronutrients turned into quite a lengthy one. I hope this was informative. As always, I'm here to help you guys. My next little mini chat will be on how to meal plan and how to prepare for a week for a one person, and then how to expand on that for a family, assuming your whole family wants to eat what you're eating, which is always the best. So we'll talk more about that in next time, and I'll try to keep it relatively to the point. For now, go out, get yourself a weigh scale, digital weigh scale, screenshot. I'll go back here through the things, screenshot these things. They're important so that you know. So there's your 30 grams, how to calculate your other macronutrients. Again, math, not everybody's strong point, so let me know if you need help. Then over here, how to calculate your macros on your protein based on the in-body machine scan. And then this one's important too, like how many calories per gram do each one of the macronutrients have? All right, guys, so hopefully that's helpful. Thank you for paying attention. And as always, just reach out if you need help. Take care. Bye.